3 in the morning, dead silence over Crystal Lake, then the buzz of a chainsaw ripping through my dreams like a freight train. I shot up in bed, heart hammering against my ribs. That sound? It was coming from my front yard. Through the bedroom window, I could see 2 figures in bright yellow rain slickers, hunched over my grandfather's oak tree, the one that had been standing guard over this property since 1952. I threw on jeans and boots, grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand. By the time I hit the front porch, they were halfway through the trunk, wood chips flying everywhere, diesel smoke thick in the air. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" The shorter one shut off the saw and turned around. Karen Miller. I'd seen her at the homeowner association meetings. Blonde, pushy, always had something to complain about. Next to her stood another woman, identical build, same haircut. Had to be her sister. Mr. Harrison. Karen's voice was sugar sweet, like she was explaining something to a 5-year-old. "This tree overhangs the public road by 3 feet. According to the new emergency safety regulation we passed last week, it's a hazard." I stepped closer, shining my light on the half-cut tree. You can't just show up in the middle of the night and... The sister, Sharon, I think her name was, pulled out a folded paper from her jacket. Emergency Ordinance for Immediate Threat Removal, Article 12, Section 4. She waved it like a magic wand. Plus, you'll be covering the cost of the removal crew, $3,200. You ever feel like you're living in some kind of upside-down world? These 2 women, dressed like they were heading to a fishing trip, just told me I owed them $3,000 for cutting down my own tree. "That tree has been here for 70 years, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My grandfather planted it when he built this house." Karen fired up the chainsaw again, had to shout over the noise. "Well, your grandfather didn't have to follow modern safety codes, did he?" 5 minutes later, my oak tree was lying across the driveway in pieces. Sharon handed me a bill printed on official homeowner association letterhead. Payment due in 10 business days, cash or certified check. They loaded their equipment into a white pickup truck and drove off into the darkness, leaving me standing in my yard surrounded by sawdust and the smell of 2-stroke engine oil. I walked back inside, turned on the kitchen light, and stared at that bill. $3,200 for a tree that was probably worth twice that much in lumber alone. Have you ever had one of those moments where you realize your quiet life just took a hard left turn into crazy town? Because that's exactly what this felt like. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table until sunrise, looking out at the empty spot where my grandfather's oak used to stand. Something about this whole thing felt wrong. Not just wrong, planned. And if you're watching Conflict Story, you know that when something feels like a setup, it usually is. The sisters Miller had just fired the first shot in what would become the most expensive mistake of their lives. The next morning came with a knock on my door at 7 sharp. I opened it to find Sharon Miller standing there with a clipboard thick enough to choke a horse. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison. I'm here for the property compliance inspection." "The what now?" She pushed past me into my living room like she owned the place. "As part of the emergency safety review, all properties adjacent to the incident zone require immediate assessment." Karen appeared behind her, carrying what looked like a surveyor's measuring tape and a digital camera. They moved through my house like a SWAT team, pointing at things, scribbling notes, taking pictures. "A fence height violation," Karen announced, measuring my back gate. "Code allows 4 feet maximum. Yours is 4 feet 8 inches. That fence has been the same height for..." "Walkway width insufficient," Sharon interrupted, stretching her tape across my front path. "Minimum 36 inches required for emergency access. Yours measures 32. They spent an hour documenting every supposedly wrong thing about my property. Mailbox painted wrong color. Garden border stones, creating a trip hazard. Even my porch light was apparently 2 inches too low. When they finished, Karen handed me a second bill. "Total corrective work, $14,800. We can have our certified crew fix everything by next Friday." I looked at the itemized list. Replace fence, $4,000. Widen walkway, $3,000. New mailbox installation, $800. The numbers went on and on. "This is insane," I said. "These aren't real violations." Sharon smiled that same fake sweet smile as her sister. "Mr. Harrison, we understand this might seem overwhelming, but we're prepared to offer you a very generous alternative. She pulled out a third document, a purchase offer for my house for $85,000. Market value on this place is over $400,000, I said. Well, Karen said, that's before factoring in all the code violations and the mounting fines. By the time you pay for corrections and penalties, you'll be lucky to break even. I stared at these two women standing in my living room, trying to steal my house with made-up rules and fake bills. My grandfather had built this place with his own hands. I'd spent my summers here as a kid, learned to fish from the dock he'd constructed, helped him repair that fence they claimed was too tall. I need some time to think about this, I said. Of course, Sharon said. You have 72 hours before the penalties start accumulating. After that, it's $500 per day per violation. They packed up their measuring tools and walked out like they'd just done me a favor. I sat on my porch after they left, looking at those 3 pieces of paper, the tree removal bill, the violation notice, the purchase offer, all printed on the same computer, probably in the same office. You know what I learned working federal cases for 30 years? When someone comes at you with a stack of official-looking paperwork and a tight deadline, they're usually running a con. But this con felt different. This felt personal. And that's when I realized the Miller sisters had made their first mistake. They assumed I was just another small-town retiree who'd roll over and pay up. They had no idea they were messing with someone who'd spent 3 decades tracking down people who thought they were smarter than the system. The war was just getting started. By Thursday, the whole neighborhood knew about my violations. Karen Miller had made sure of that. I walked to Peterson's Market for coffee and eggs, and suddenly everyone was treating me like I had the plague. Mrs. Garcia, who used to wave from her garden every morning, turned her back when she saw me coming. Tom Wilson crossed the street rather than pass me on the sidewalk. At the checkout counter, Jenny Peterson leaned over and whispered to the customer behind me, "That's the one with all the safety violations. Karen Miller says he's been ignoring code enforcement for years." I paid for my groceries and walked home, feeling like I was wearing a scarlet letter. That evening, I was sitting on my porch when I heard voices from the street. A group of neighbors had gathered around Karen Miller, who was pointing at my house and talking loud enough for me to hear every word. The tree that fell? It was completely rotted through. Could have killed someone's child walking to school. She shook her head dramatically. And now he's refusing to fix the other safety hazards on his property. "What kind of hazards?" asked Mrs. Rodriguez from 2 houses down. "Illegal fence height, trip hazards all along the walkway. His mailbox doesn't meet Postal Service requirements." Karen's voice carried that tone of someone delivering bad news about a mutual friend. The homeowner association tried to work with him, offered to arrange affordable repairs, but he's being completely uncooperative. Sharon appeared next to her sister, nodding gravely. "We even offered to buy the property at fair market value, just to resolve the situation peacefully. But he wants to fight the community every step of the way." I wanted to march down there and set the record straight, tell them about the $3,000 tree bill and the $14,000 shakedown. But something held me back. Maybe it was the way they were all nodding along with every word Karen said. Or maybe it was the way Tom Wilson looked at my house like it was about to collapse on his family. Have you ever felt completely alone in a crowd of people you thought you knew? That's what this was like. These were my neighbors, people I'd shared barbecues with, helped jumpstart their cars in winter, borrowed tools from when I needed them. But right now, they looked at me like I was the problem. The group broke up around 9 o'clock, and I watched everyone head back to their houses. Karen Miller walked past my driveway and called out, "Evening, Mr. Harrison. Hope you're giving some serious thought to our conversation yesterday." I didn't answer, just sat there on my porch, listening to the lake water lap against my dock. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about something that didn't add up. If the Miller sisters were so concerned about property values and neighborhood safety, why were they trying to buy my house for a fraction of its worth? And why did their emergency safety inspection feel so much like the federal raids I used to plan? Same methodical approach, same overwhelming paperwork, same tight deadlines designed to force a quick decision. Around midnight, I got up and spread all their documents across my kitchen table, the tree removal bill, the violation notice, the purchase offer. That's when I noticed something interesting. All 3 documents had the same tiny formatting error in the header. The word association was spelled with 2 S's instead of 3. Same computer, same operator, same person who couldn't spell. But more importantly, I noticed something else. The purchase offer wasn't just from the Miller sisters. It was from something called Twin Sisters Development LLC. I'd never heard of that company before, but I had a feeling I was about to learn a lot more about it. The sisters had just made their second mistake. They'd left a paper trail. And paper trails, those were my special. Friday morning, I drove into town to visit City Hall. Time to do what I did best, follow the money. The records office was run by a kid named Jake Morrison, maybe 30 years old, eager to help. When I asked about recent homeowner association complaints, his face changed. "You're the third person this month asking about that," he said, pulling a thick folder from his filing cabinet. "Mr. Harrison, right? Creek Road property?" I nodded. "What do you mean the third person?" Jake lowered his voice and glanced around the empty office. "Look, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but something's not right with these complaints. The Miller sisters have filed 47 violation reports in the past 8 months. 47? All different properties, all requiring immediate correction through their approved contractor list." He opened the folder and showed me page after page of official complaints. And here's the weird part. Every single homeowner eventually sold to Twin Sisters Development. My blood went cold. Every single one? 23 families so far, all sold for way under market value. Jake pulled out a spreadsheet. Average sale price was about 60% of assessed value. I looked at the names on his list. The Hendersons on Maple Street. I remembered their "for sale" sign going up suddenly last spring. The Kowalskis near the marina, gone by summer's end. One by one, Jake was showing me the systematic destruction of my neighborhood. "Jake, this is a pattern. This is organized." He nodded grimly. "I know. I've been trying to get the county prosecutor interested, but the Miller sisters always have their paperwork in order. Everything looks legitimate on the surface." I studied his records more carefully. Twin Sisters Development wasn't just buying individual houses. They were assembling an entire section of lakefront property, piece by piece. What happens to the properties after they buy them? Jake pulled up another file on his computer. That's where it gets interesting. Twin Sisters Development is owned by Morgan Construction Group, and Morgan has preliminary approval for a luxury resort development on the north shore of Crystal Lake. The pieces clicked into place like tumblers in a lock. The Miller sisters weren't just running a real estate scam. They were clearing land for a major development project. My house, my neighbors' houses, all of it was standing in the way of a multi-million-dollar resort. "Jake, I need you to print everything you have on Twin Sisters Development and Morgan Construction." "I can't officially." "Son, I spent 30 years as a federal investigator. This isn't a violation. This is evidence of organized fraud." I showed him my retired DEA credentials. "And if I'm right, your cooperation today might prevent a lot more families from losing their homes." 20 minutes later, I walked out of City Hall with a manila envelope full of documents. Purchase records, contractor licenses, corporate filings, and building permits. But the most interesting document was a letter buried in Morgan Construction's file, a feasibility study that identified potential obstacles to development along the Crystal Lake shoreline. My grandfather's property was highlighted in yellow. Primary resistance location, the report said. 70-year occupancy, strong community ties, recommend priority acquisition through alternative methods. Alternative methods, like fake violations and intimidation. I sat in my truck outside City Hall, staring at that phrase. These people had done their homework. They knew exactly which properties they needed, exactly which families might resist, and exactly how to pressure them into selling. But they'd made one critical error in their research. They'd assumed I was just another small-town retiree. They had no idea they were targeting someone who'd spent 3 decades dismantling criminal organizations. As I drove home, I passed Karen Miller's white pickup truck, parked outside the Kowalski house, the one that had sold last month. She was talking to new potential victims. Time to turn the tables. These sisters wanted to play hardball. They were about to discover what hardball really looked like. That weekend, my quiet investigation got a lot less quiet. I was in my garage Saturday morning, going through Jake's documents one more time when I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. Through the window, I saw a county sheriff's car and 2 deputies walking toward my front door. Behind them came Karen and Sharon Miller, both carrying briefcases like they were heading to a board meeting. I met them on my front porch. "Morning, officers. What can I do for you?" The older deputy, name tag reading Martinez, held up an official-looking document. "Mr. Harrison, we have a court order for immediate property assessment and potential asset seizure." My stomach dropped. "Asset seizure?" Sharon Miller stepped forward with that same fake concerned smile. "Mr. Harrison, you missed the deadline for violation corrections. Under emergency safety protocols, the county can now take possession of properties deemed hazardous to public welfare." I read the court order. Judge Frank Miller presiding. Miller, same last name as the sisters. You ever have one of those moments where you realize you've been playing chess while your opponent was playing with a stacked deck? That's what this felt like. "This is my family's home," I said to Deputy Martinez. "I've lived here for 30 years. Sir, I understand this is difficult, but if the property poses a public safety risk, we have to follow the court's directive." Karen opened her briefcase and pulled out yet another document. "However, Mr. Harrison, we're still prepared to offer a solution. Twin Sisters Development is willing to purchase the property immediately for $90,000. That's $5,000 more than our original offer. Generous of them, considering they were about to steal it for nothing. And if I refuse?" "Then the county takes possession next Friday," Sharon said. "Properties seized under safety violations are sold at public auction, usually for much less than our current offer." Deputy Martinez looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Harrison, I've got to advise you. Fighting this in court could take months, and you'd still be responsible for storage fees and legal costs while the case is pending." I looked at these two women standing in my driveway with the full power of the local legal system behind them. They had a judge, they had the sheriff's department, they probably had half the county officials in their pocket. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They assumed I'd fold under official pressure, just like all the other families before me. They didn't know that federal investigations had taught me something important. When someone has to use the legal system to steal from you, it means they're not as powerful as they want you to think. "I need to make a phone call," I said. "Of course," Karen said. "Take your time, but remember, our offer expires Monday morning." After they left, I sat in my kitchen staring at Judge Frank Miller's signature on that court order. Frank Miller had to be related to the sisters, maybe their father, maybe an uncle. Either way, it explained how they had managed to get 23 families to sell their homes. They weren't just running a real estate scam. They had the entire local legal system helping them do it. But there was one thing they didn't count on. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Special Agent Rita Vasquez, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We'd worked a money laundering case together 5 years ago. "Dave Harrison," she said when she picked up. "How's retirement treating you?" "Rita, I need a favor. How would you feel about investigating a multi-million-dollar real estate fraud with corruption of local officials?" There was a pause. "I'd feel like Christmas came early. What do you have?" I spent 20 minutes walking her through everything. The systematic targeting of homeowners, the fake violations, the family connection to the judge, the development project behind it all. "Dave, if half of what you're telling me is true, this could be a major federal case. Real estate fraud, conspiracy, corruption under color of law. What do you need from me?" "Keep playing along, act like you're considering their offer, and if they approach you again with any kind of deal or threat, I want you to record everything." "You want me to wear a wire?" "I want you to be our inside man. Think you can handle one more undercover operation?" I looked out my kitchen window at the empty spot where my grandfather's oak tree used to stand. Then I looked at the lake where I'd learned to fish as a kid, where my grandfather had taught me that some things are worth fighting for. "Rita, these people picked the wrong house to steal." Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. The Miller sisters thought they were closing in for the kill. They had no idea they were about to walk straight into a federal trap. Monday morning, 9 o'clock sharp, the Miller sisters knocked on my door. I was ready for them. Under my shirt was a wire so small I couldn't even feel it. In my kitchen, FBI agents were monitoring every word from a surveillance van parked 3 blocks away. Rita Vasquez had worked fast over the weekend. I opened the door looking defeated, shoulders slumped, tired eyes, the picture of a man who'd given up fighting. "Mr. Harrison," Karen said, studying my face, "I hope you've had time to consider our generous offer." "Come in," I said quietly. "I think we need to talk." They followed me to the kitchen table where I'd spread out all their documents: the tree bill, the violation notices, the court order, the purchase agreement. "This is my grandfather's house," I said, letting exhaustion creep into my voice. 90,000 seems fair given the circumstances, Sharon finished. "David, you have to understand. Fighting this will only cost you more money in the long run. Legal fees, court costs, storage fees, while your property sits in county custody." Karen pulled out a pen and slid the purchase agreement toward me. "Sign today, and we can have you moved out by Friday. Clean break, cash in hand, no more stress." I picked up the pen, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something? Just between us. This development project, the resort on the lake, that's what this is really about, isn't it?" The sisters exchanged a quick glance. Karen's smile never wavered, but I caught something in her eyes. Pride, maybe, or greed. "Mr. Harrison, I'm not sure what you mean." "Come on, 23 families all sell their lakefront properties in 8 months, all to the same company, all for way under market value?" I shook my head. "That's not a coincidence. That's a plan." Sharon leaned forward. "David, even if that were true, what difference does it make? Progress is coming whether you fight it or not. At least this way, you get something for your property." "Instead of losing it for nothing in a county auction," Karen added. I nodded slowly, like I was finally accepting reality. "You know what? You're right. I can't fight the whole system." I started to sign the document. Then I paused again. "Just out of curiosity, how much is my property really worth to Morgan Construction?" "What do you mean?" Karen asked. "For the resort development, my land specifically. What's it actually worth to them?" This time Sharon couldn't help herself. "David, your property is the keystone piece. Without it, they can't build the marina access or the main resort entrance. Your land is worth—" She caught herself, but it was too late. "How much, Sharon?" Karen shot her sister a warning look, but the damage was done. "That's fine," Sharon said with a sigh. "Morgan Construction valued your property at $1.2 million. Your grandfather built on the best spot on the whole lake. Perfect elevation, perfect water access, perfect everything. So, you're offering me $90,000 for something worth $1.2 million? We're offering you $90,000 for something that's about to be taken by the county for nothing," Karen said, her fake sweet voice finally showing some steel. "Don't get greedy, David. Take the deal and walk away." "Or what?" "Or we proceed with the seizure order. Judge Miller has already signed off on it." Karen's smile turned cold. "My Uncle Frank doesn't like people who waste the court's time." There it was, the family connection, the corruption, the whole scheme laid out in one sentence. I set down the pen and looked at these two women who thought they'd cornered me. "Ladies, I have to be honest with you about something." "What's that?" Sharon asked. I reached into my shirt and pulled out the wire, holding it up so they could see the tiny transmitter. "I'm Dave Harrison, retired DEA agent, and you've just confessed to real estate fraud, corruption of public officials, and conspiracy to commit theft under federal jurisdiction." The color drained from both their faces. Karen stood up so fast her chair fell over. "You can't record us without consent. That's illegal." "Actually, it's not. Not when you're documenting federal crimes." I smiled for the first time in a week. "Ladies, you're under arrest." The kitchen door opened and Rita Vasquez walked in with 2 federal agents. "Karen Miller, Sharon Miller, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, real estate fraud, and corruption under color of federal law." As the agents handcuffed the sisters, Karen turned to me with pure hatred in her eyes. "You think you've won? You have no idea how deep this goes. We're just the beginning." But I did know how deep it went. Because while she was talking, more FBI agents were arresting Judge Frank Miller at the courthouse, along with 3 county commissioners and the head of the building department. The Miller sisters had built their empire on one crucial mistake. They thought small-town corruption was invisible to federal oversight. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The federal investigation moved fast once the Miller sisters started talking. Turns out Karen was right about one thing. It went deeper than I'd imagined. Morgan Construction had been planning this lakefront development for 3 years, systematically identifying properties, bribing officials, and setting up shell companies to hide the money trail. Judge Frank Miller wasn't just their uncle. He was a silent partner in Twin Sisters development, along with the county building inspector and 2 city council members. They'd turned property theft into a family business. Within a week, the FBI had recovered $2.8 million in stolen proceeds and frozen Morgan Construction's development permits. Every family that had been forced to sell their homes got their properties back, plus compensation for damages. But my victory came with a price I hadn't expected. Jake Morrison, the young records clerk who'd helped me piece together the evidence, got transferred to a different department. Budget cuts, they said, but we both knew better. He'd stuck his neck out to help expose the corruption, and even though we'd won, someone had to pay the political price. "Don't feel bad about it," Jake told me when I visited him at his new job in the county assessor's office. "What we did was right. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you something." He was 28 years old and already wiser than most people twice his age. The neighborhood never quite felt the same either. Half my neighbors moved away, embarrassed by how quickly they had turned on me based on lies. The ones who stayed were friendly enough, but there was an awkwardness that hadn't been there before. Mrs. Garcia still waved from her garden, but it felt different. Tom Wilson helped me replant a new oak tree where my grandfather's had been cut down, but we didn't talk much while we worked. Trust, once broken, doesn't just grow back like a tree. The Miller sisters got 18 months in federal prison, plus restitution. Judge Miller lost his position and his law license. Morgan Construction folded under the weight of federal charges and civil lawsuits. But I kept thinking about what Sharon Miller had said during her sentencing hearing. We gave those people a choice. We offered them money for their properties. Nobody forced them to sell. Even facing prison, she still didn't understand what they'd really stolen. It wasn't just houses or money. It was the feeling of safety in your own home, the trust between neighbors, the belief that the system would protect you instead of preying on you. 3 months later, I was sitting on my dock at sunset when Rita Vasquez called. "Dave, I've got some news. The Justice Department wants to offer you a consultant position, financial crimes investigations. What do you think?" I looked out over Crystal Lake, watching the sun paint the water gold and orange. My grandfather had built this dock with his own hands. He'd taught me to fish from this exact spot. "Rita, I think I'm done chasing criminals. Time to enjoy what I fought to keep." "I understand, but Dave, if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me." After I hung up, I sat there until full dark, listening to the lake water against the dock posts. Same sound I'd fallen asleep to as a kid. Same sound that would be there long after I was gone. The Miller sisters thought they could steal my grandfather's legacy with fake paperwork and corrupt judges. They learned the hard way that some things aren't for sale at any price. My house is still here. My dock is still here. And every morning when I watch the sunrise over Crystal Lake, I remember what my grandfather taught me. When someone tries to take what's yours, you don't just fight for the property. You fight for the principle. Because once you let them steal your home, they'll come for everything else you love. Have you ever had to fight for something that couldn't be replaced? Let me know in the comments what you'd do if someone tried to steal your family's legacy. And if this story hit close to home, hit that like button. Sometimes the system works, but only if good people are willing to stand up and make it work. The war was over. I'd won. But the real victory wasn't keeping my house. It was proving that ordinary people still have the power to fight back against corruption, no matter how deep it goes.